Let's pray together. Holy and gracious and living and powerful, all-knowing God, we give you thanks that you know us and you love us. We give you thanks that you've just heard our confession and you forgive us, God. And so if there's any sins that have been badgering us, if there's sins from the past that we just keep repeating, or we've stopped, but we just keep thinking that we need to confess it again, that we just haven't been forgiven truly, God, I pray that today we would know that you love us, that you forgive us, that you've claimed us, that you've redeemed us through Jesus, and we belong to you now. And that your word, God, is the final authority in our lives, that your word of forgiveness is true, no matter what any other voice, ours or other people's, might say. God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for his love that never ends. It just goes on and on and on and on. Lord, help us to hear from you today, words of life and truth. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen. Well, how many of you would say that in your family, in your relationships, in the situations in your family, that there's some things that are a little bit messy? Yeah, some of you are waving both hands. We see you. We love you. If that situation or person is here, don't stare at them. Don't point them out. It's true. Families are messy. There's messiness in families, and the picture on your wall or the picture you post on Facebook or Instagram does not tell the full story. There's more. And when someone says, "How is your family?" you look at them and smile and say, "Oh, we're great. We are great." But you want to say, "Well, it's super complicated, and there's this going on and this going on." I mean, families are complicated. Families are messy. And there's all sorts of different things that can go on. She's not talking to him. He's taking him to court. They're married but not living together. They're living together but they're not married. He's suing that person. I mean, there's all these different scenarios that unfold in our families, and it's just messy and complex and complicated. And so my hope for you today, as we look at Ruth chapter 4, my hope for you today is that you would know that there is a faithful God. A faithful God who blesses the messes. And we'll see that. We see that through Scripture again and again and again. And so I hope that you see that for yourself today too. And I hope that you hear a few things where you say, "Okay, I could try this in my family. This might help in my relationships, my situation, my circumstances." Just before we hit Ruth 4, here's just a super quick recap. Chapter 1, there's a famine and all the men die and all the women are widowed. Ruth, Naomi, and Orpah. Chapter 2, and we talked about there's blessing through obedience. Remember that? There's blessing through obedience and suffering through sin. Chapter 2, they return to Bethlehem and they're in poverty, but Ruth happens to be gleaning and meets this man named Boaz, who happens to be a family or kinsman redeemer. Chapter 3, we talked about the S word. Anyone remember what the S word was? Submission. How dare you say that so boldly in public? Yes, submission was the S word. And we talked about submitting to God and submitting to other people, and just submitting to husbands to wives, wives to husbands, children to parents, all sorts of different scenarios. Most of all, submitting to God, saying, "God, your will, your ways, your plan is best." And then we find ourselves at the end of chapter 3. Remember, Ruth has gone to the barn. She's laid down at Boaz's feet. She's asked Boaz, or told Boaz, I would say yes if you were to propose to me. And then it's just kind of left hanging, because it turns out there's another kinsman redeemer who's more closely related to Ruth than Boaz is. And so we know that Ruth is about to get married. We just don't know to who. And so that's where we pick up in chapter 4, and it starts with these words. "Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, 'Come over here, my friend, and sit down.' So he went over and sat down." The city gate is the business center. It's the courthouse. You don't go to the lawyer. You don't go to a judge. You go to the city gate. And that's where all transactions happen. And they would happen in front of the elders. You would gather this group together, and they would kind of be the witnesses to whatever transactions were happening there. And Boaz goes to wait for this relative who's more closely related to Naomi and Ruth to come along. And we don't hear a lot about God actually in the book of Ruth. But we see his hand at work again and again and again. Remember, so for example, they came to Bethlehem from Moab, and it just happened to be harvest time. Or she was gleaning in the fields and just happened to end up in Boaz's field. And Boaz just happened to come along just at that time and happened to notice her. And so now we have Boaz who says, I've got to go to the gate of the city, and I'm just going to sit here and wait as long as it takes for this guy to come. Oh, look, there he is, right? It's another one of these like, oh, can you believe it? Here comes this guy. In the NIV, it says this, come over here, my friend, and sit down. In Hebrew, it literally says so-and-so. It doesn't say friend. It doesn't name him. Along came so-and-so, old what's-his-face. And that's significant for us because in the book of Ruth, all the names have had different meanings that have kind of told us about who they are. But here, old what's-his-face doesn't even get named. And we'll see a little bit later on why that's significant for us. Even Orpah, the widow who leaves Naomi, gets named. But this guy, old so-and-so, old what's-his-face, doesn't even get a shout-out there. Here's just a quick bit of biblical wisdom that we'll see come true here, and I would encourage you to do. It's this: just do the right thing. Just do the right thing. Remember Nike's slogan, just do it? Don't just do it. Do the right thing. And we're going to see that unfold as we keep reading. It says this, starting at verse 2. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here. And they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said. So Boaz gathers together these 10 men. These are the leaders. This is kind of the court is in session now. And did you see how quickly that worked? There's not like 10 months of litigations and $1,000 in lawyer bills. This is just like super quick. Get together 10 guys, get together a person. Do you want to do it? I'm going to do it. Sold. Just like that. It's just so quick and easy. And these elders are the living document. They're not going to sign anything, but if a question comes up, you can call together those 10 men again and say, oh yeah, we witnessed this, Boaz and old what's-his-face, they had this land deal, and this is how it all unfolded. And Boaz tells the situation to him. Hey, Naomi, you'll remember Naomi, Elimelech's widow, has this land, and she needs to do something about it. It needs to be redeemed. She needs to be redeemed. And in Jewish culture, there was kind of this simple process that there was God, and there was family, and there was land. If you think about Abraham, God calls Abram and says, I will be your God, and you'll be my people. And then he says, I'm going to give you this huge family, and I'm going to give you this land. And those three things went hand in hand. The way land worked is you didn't own the land. It was God's land. You were given the privilege to harvest the land that you were given, but it always remained God's land. And something great about that was this thought that everything I have, everything I'm depending on, relying on, all actually comes from the hand of God. If you think about some of Jesus' stories that he tells, God is often the owner of the land, and everyone else are just tenants, just workers on the land. Anyway, so that's the scenario here, and Boaz says, there's this land, you get first shot at it, and the man says, yeah, I'll buy it. But there's something a bit odd here. Remember, Bethlehem is super small. It's a few hundred people, 300, maybe 400, something like that. Here's the odd thing. Why hasn't old what's-his-face already stepped in to do something? Why hasn't old what's-his-face? He must know that Naomi's back, right? I mean, there's a few hundred people. He must know that there's this issue with the land that's right there. He must have heard about this widow, the Moabite. I mean, that would be huge news. I mean, think about when you go to the grocery store and all the tabloids have the same thing on them, right? It's all about Prince Harry or whatever it is for a given week. All the news that month in Bethlehem would have been all about Naomi and Ruth coming back. That'd be all the chit-chat. So why hasn't old what's-his-face stepped up to do something to help out Naomi and Ruth? Do you guys know what it's called when you know the right thing to do and you don't do it? Do you know what that's called? Sin. That's called sin. And we often confess the things that I've done and the things that I have left undone. I knew it was right. I knew that I should do it. I knew that you'd want me to do it, but I didn't do it. That's called sin. And so this man says, the court is in session. He says, there's this land, and old what's-his-face says, yeah, I'll buy it. Absolutely, I'll take that land. My daughter Summer will often give me these scenarios, and a scenario that she's given me often lately has been, if that house was for sale for $1, would you buy it? What do you think my answer is? Yes, absolutely yes. All land deals in Vancouver, Langley, Burnaby, Surrey, if it's $1, I'll absolutely buy it. I'll be the biggest land baron this side of Jim Pattison. I mean, it'll just be phenomenal, right? That's what it's like for this man. There's this land for sale? Yeah, absolutely. This is a no-brainer. I will take the land. Let's keep reading. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Old what's-his-face, old so-and-so wants the blessing without the sacrifice. He wants the blessing of this land. Absolutely, I'll take that land. Great. When you take the land, you also get this very bitter, depressed mother-in-law and this widowed Moabite who's barren, and your expectation is that you'll have a child with her, a son, and when he grows up, after you've been working this field and providing for him, then he will actually get ownership of the field back. Well, what's-his-face says, hold on. I don't want to do that anymore. It's not sounding so good anymore. And we aren't given all the reasons why, but it's interesting. He goes first from, oh yeah, I'll take that land, absolutely. And once he hears about the conditions, the terms, he says, oh, no, I don't want to do that. It's a pretty quick, kind of confusing switch. And it made me think of this. These are just some dishwasher pods that we have. I'm sure these work great. Finnish Power Balls, they're called. Maybe you have this brand too. It says in big bold letters here, wrapper dissolves in water, no need to unwrap, right? They've kind of made this a big deal. You do not have to unwrap these. So I took out a pod. I was like, oh, this seems like quite a significant wrapper on here. So I'm looking at it, and on the back of the wrapper, guess what it says? Remove wrapper before use. This is a confusing thing, isn't it? They're advertising, the big sales pitches, you don't have to remove the wrapper. And I've never thought about removing wrappers before because I've never had dishwasher pods that have wrappers before. I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. No need to remove the wrapper. Excellent. I'll take it. You have to remove the wrapper. I don't want it anymore, right? I mean, and that's old what's-his-face. I want it. I don't want it. I'm giving some of these away for free because I don't want them anymore. Here, you take them. Give you some back there too. You want one? You don't do you do the dishes? Okay, there you go. Anyway, that's what happens with old what's-his-face. He does this old switcheroo. I want it, I don't want it. Everyone's like, yeah, okay. I mean, whatever. It's interesting here. There could be a whole bunch of reasons why he doesn't want it. He says that it will endanger his own estate. I don't know if he's concerned his wife will be very upset when he shows up with these two women. He says, hey, good news, honey, we bought some more land today. Good news. By the way, we also have Naomi and Ruth. They're going to be living with us, and I'm going to be sleeping with Ruth for a little while. You guys mingle. I'll be outside in the field, right? Like maybe he thinks that will endanger his estate because his wife will kill him. That's possible. Maybe he's concerned about, maybe he has other sons and he's worried about this son that he'll have to raise up getting more of the inheritance or draining some of his inheritance with, I don't know, wanting to go to get an arts degree or something like that. I don't know what the full concern is, but he's worried about his estate. And I don't really know how to feel about old what's-his-face. Here's why. On one hand, I super appreciate his decisiveness. Even though he switches from one answer to the other, I like that it's pretty quick, right? He doesn't belabor this. He doesn't say, like, give me 2 months to think about it, or I'm going to take this to my friends and consider it. So I like that. What I don't like is he wants the blessing without the sacrifice. Absolutely. I want to profit from this field. I want that extra wealth, that income, that notoriety. I want to be known as having all this land. But I don't want to have to sacrifice anything for it. I don't want to have to take care of these women and try and have a son and raise this son. I don't want to have to do that. And I think that's so common in families. Often in families, there's someone who wants the blessing without the sacrifice. Right? They live together because they want the blessing of some of the things that come together, and they're sleeping together, and they're getting tax cuts, and all those things are going well, but they don't want the sacrifice of saying, yeah, we're actually committed to each other. This is like a forever kind of thing. They want the blessing without the sacrifice. Or sometimes family members will be like, oh, it's so important that we get the whole family together, and we're going to have a family reunion and get a family picture before old Nana passes off. And so everyone does it, and then they're the ones who don't show up. They're like, oh, well, I had to work that day and I didn't want to miss my shift. I need that $80, right? I mean, there's things that happen in family where people want the blessing of family without the sacrifice of the family. Or we have this idea that, oh, well, family should just be all good times all the time. And then when they have to sacrifice, when there's a challenge, an obstacle, a difficulty, like on day one of having a family, you're like, oh, I'm out of here. I don't want, this is more commitment than I thought. I see it in churches too. I see it in this church sometimes. We'll do a survey and say, who wants Bible studies? And everyone's like, oh yeah, we want Bible studies. And then it's like, who's going to lead a Bible study? No, I can't lead a Bible study. I've never been to seminary, or I led one Bible study once, or I went to a Bible study and didn't like it. Or we'll say, like, who thinks we should have Sunday school? Absolutely, Pastor, we have got to have Sunday school. Who's going to volunteer for Sunday school? I can't volunteer for Sunday school. I don't have kids. I can't volunteer for Sunday school because I have kids and I need a break from them. I can't volunteer for Sunday school, whatever, fill in the blank. And then we have other people saying, we absolutely have to have Sunday school, but I'm not going to bring my kids because I don't want to come early or stay late or whatever it is. So here we are. We've got like this awesome Sunday school where no one's volunteering and no one's showing up. But we're really committed to Sunday school, right? We want the blessing. We want them to show up Christmas Eve and sing us a song, but none of us want the sacrifice. That's how I feel about old what's-his-face so-and-so. All blessing, no sacrifice. You guys know about blessings and sacrifices, right? I'm super blessed. I have 3 amazing children. Super, super blessed. Has there been any sacrifice? Not much today because I haven't seen them. But, I mean, for example, I drive a 2010 Dodge Caravan, I'm so blessed to have a 2010 Dodge Caravan. My Caravan has doubled in weight since I bought it because of all the gummy bears and French fries and things stuffed under the seats. I mean, I'm paying double in gas just to haul this thing around, this like rotting food deposit or whatever it is. There's blessing and there's sacrifice. They go together. Here's something fascinating. So-and-so won't redeem the land and Ruth, and so he takes off his sandal and gives it to Boaz. Some people commented that it was like casual Friday today because I'm wearing my sandals. I'm just wondering, who would like this sandal? I've been wearing it since about 7:30. I'm smelling good. Who would like this? Isn't that a bizarre transaction? He takes it off and gives it to Boaz, and I have so many questions about that. Does he just get the one? Because now you've got 2 guys with pointless sandals, right? And then another thing I wonder about is, does this guy limp kind of home? He's like, oh, made a deal today down at the courthouse, and does he rush right out and get a new sandal? Do you keep the sandal, or once the transaction is done, do you give it back? I don't really get the logistics of the sandal process, but this whole scenario could have gone very differently, and I want to read this for you from Deuteronomy 25. It's talking about the same situation that we're looking at right here, though the relationships are a bit different. It says this, starting at verse 5. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders at the town gate and say, My husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of his town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled. Can you imagine this scenario playing out? Okay, so the husband dies, this widow goes to her brother-in-law and says, listen, you got to marry me, we have to have a son together. And he's like, I don't want to have a son. That's the law. You have to have a son with me. I don't want to do it. Well, then I'm going to the town gate to talk to the elders. Fine, go for it. So she goes, then they call him in. Okay, buddy, you got to come here. You've got to, this is the law, you have to do it. I think I'm not going to do it. So then right there in the presence of them, this widow comes up, and does she wrestle the sandal off of him? Like, is it a fight? And he's like dodging her, or does he just have to let it happen? It's very strange. She takes off his sandal. Again, any takers for this? No takers for the sandal. Takes off his sandal, spits in his face. Like, does she just get the one spit? Because if she does, she should really go for it. Spits in his face and says, that's what you get. And then his family becomes the family known as the unsandaled. Forever. Does he have to take off? I'm so curious about the sandals. Does he have to take off both sandals? Does he get to wear sandals still, but he's known as the unsandaled? I don't really know how that all unfolds, but I love it. And from now on, if that ever happens in my relationships, my friendships, that's what I'm doing. I can't see a circumstance where this will come in handy, but I'm super excited if it does. All of these things are happening, right, in the situation with Ruth and Boaz and old what's-his-face. And so it seems like this could happen here, that this so-and-so, what's-his-face, as he says, I don't want to do it, it seems like Ruth could be walking up to grab his sandal and spit in his face, except for Boaz. I said before, it's interesting that we don't ever hear the name of old what's-his-face. And here's a couple things that are great about that. It's great because old what's-his-face would go down forever in history. His family would be named forever as those rotten scoundrels who just wouldn't do what was right. So I love here that God and the author of Ruth say, we're just going to give this guy a pass because it works out through Boaz. And here's just something I think would be great for our lives, our families. When things work out, even though it's not the way we wanted, it would be great if we could just celebrate the blessing and stop stewing on our disappointment. How often in our lives have things worked out but not the way we wanted, and so we're just super disappointed? And we just keep thinking about, well, that sure, it was fine, but... Right? I mean, do you ever do that? Oh, it was fine, but, people ask about your vacation. How was your vacation? Well, it rained. You just spent 5 days in Disneyland. Oh, the weather, it's too hot, too cold. We wanted pizza from Boston Pizza, but they were closed. We had to get Panago. I don't know. Right? It's interesting. So often we fixate on the thing that disappointed us, even though it all worked out in the end. This story all works out in the end because of God's providence and because of Boaz being a faithful, godly man. And so I love that there's no opportunity really to get hung up on old what's-his-face because God was faithful again in this story. It says this, starting at verse 9. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I've also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today, you are witnesses. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz makes this formal announcement. You've all heard it here. He has given up his right to buy the land. He's given me his sandal, even though I didn't want it. You've all seen this transaction unfold. And now he's passed, and so I will be buying the land, preserving the name, and marrying Ruth and taking Naomi into my home and providing for her. And I feel like the crowd at that point must be like, well, way to go. Like, they all cheer, they're celebrating, and then the elders speak this blessing over him, and it's kind of a fascinating blessing. And so I want to just look at this a little bit. I was trying to think of a great kind of slogan to try and help you remember how this kind of unfolds. And so these are some slogans I thought of but didn't use. When things are messed up, ask to be blessed up. Hey, how do you feel about when things are messed up, ask to be blessed up? Or I thought of this one, when things get messy, ask for a blessing. Hey, what do you think about that one? Not very good either. I think if we go to the next slide, this is just kind of where I landed. Is God faithfully blesses the messes. We see that again and again and again. We see this right here in the story of Ruth, because this is a mess, right? She's married, she's barren, her husband dies, she leaves her home, goes to Bethlehem, she's working at the food bank, gleaning. This guy's supposed to marry her but doesn't want to. There's a bit of a mess here, but God faithfully blesses the messes. And in this blessing that they speak over her, we see that again. They say, this woman who is coming into your home, may God make her like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. Do you remember the story of Rachel and Leah? It's the story following Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? And Jacob falls in love with the younger daughter. He falls in love with her. And, sorry, I just want to check my notes here. Yeah, so he falls in love with her and talks to the father. Says, great, work for me for 7 years and you can marry the youngest daughter. On the wedding night, the father-in-law-to-be switches the girls, so he marries the wrong sister. Wakes up in the morning, says, what have you done to me? And the father says, work 7 more years, you can have the daughter you wanted, right? It'll be fine. And so that's what ends up happening. And so then they go to start a family, and she's barren, but she's having kids, and the daughters, the wives are fighting. And eventually, though, God blesses them, right? God blesses this mess. And so through Rachel and through Leah and through 2 maidservants, we get the 12 tribes of Israel. That's where this great nation comes from. That whole story is just messy all the way along. But so they're saying, may this woman, this young woman that you're marrying, may she be like Rachel and Leah, who just grows a beautiful nation of people. May that be the blessing of Ruth to you, Boaz. May you grow into a great nation. They say, may you be renowned and famous in Ephrathah and in Bethlehem. And so that Ephrathah is the tribe, and then Bethlehem is the city. May you be even more famous here. May news of what you've done here spread. And then finally they refer to this story. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Do you know this story? This is like among the creepiest, weirdest stories in all of the Bible. Just in case you don't know it, let me just give you a quick refresh here. Okay, so Judah has 3 sons. The oldest son marries Tamar. He's an evil man, and he dies. So the second son, the middle son, now marries Tamar. He's evil. I won't give you the details of the things that he does, but it's gross. And he's evil, and he dies. And then Judah, the father-in-law, says to Tamar, my youngest son, my only son left now, my youngest son will marry you to give you a son, but not yet. He's too young. Just wait a little while. So she's waiting, and she's waiting to marry this younger son, and time goes by, and eventually she's like, he's lying to me. This youngest son is not coming. He's not going to marry me. And she hears that her father-in-law, Judah, is coming to town. And so she does what any young woman would do. She dresses up as a prostitute. Waits by the side of the road. Judah sees her, spends a romantic evening with her, and she becomes pregnant. The townspeople see now that Tamar is pregnant and go to Judah and say, hey, this daughter-in-law has been unfaithful. She slept with somebody, now she's pregnant. We think you should kill her. And he says, yes, let's kill her. Just to stop there, anytime you're dressing up as a prostitute to sleep with your father-in-law, would you agree that's messy? Can I get an amen for that? Amen. Absolutely. Okay, so this is a disaster of a family. Okay, so Judah says, yeah, if Tamar's been sleeping around, kill her. At the last moment, Tamar reveals, again, you have to read the full story to see how she does this, but reveals that it's actually going to be Judah's son, that Judah's the one that she has slept with. And so she is pregnant with twins, and the first twin baby is being born, but then Perez gets born first, kind of like shoots out of the chute. And so they're saying here, hey, may you be blessed just like Tamar and Judah. And everyone would say, I don't want that blessing, right? I mean, what a crazy, messy family that is. But what they're saying here is just like Perez was so eager to be born, and just like Perez becomes this great man who has this great family, may you have that through Ruth. And may you have a family like Perez's, because Perez goes on to be in the genealogy of King David, who just happens to be in the genealogy of Jesus. God faithfully blesses the messes. We see it again and again and again and again through the Bible. I was doing some marriage counseling with a couple just a few weeks ago, and I said to them, point to me as you think of how you want your marriage to go. Point to me to the couple in the Bible you want to have a marriage like them. Right? Or point to the perfect family in the Bible. And they're like, I don't think there is one. It just doesn't exist. There's just mess after mess after mess after mess. And yet what we see again and again is God faithfully blesses the messes. Church, there's been a lot going on this morning. We've talked about stealing sandals and spitting in people's faces, and we've talked about crazy, incestuous family relationships. The whole point is this: no matter how messy your family might seem, I want you to know that there's a Redeemer who's come to rescue your family. I want you to know that there's a Redeemer so much greater than Boaz, that he hasn't just redeemed one family here or one family there, but he's come to redeem the whole world. That he's come to rescue all of us. And all the land is his, all the property is his, all the wealth is his, and everything you have comes from his hand to bless you. And no matter how crazy the situation might be in your family, no matter how strained, divided, just a disaster that it might be, God faithfully blesses the messes as we turn to him and say, God, I need you. Jesus is that rescuer. Jesus is the one who comes and gives blessing through his sacrifice. When Jesus comes, he knows the sacrifice that's coming. He knows from day one, he knows from before he's born, his mission is to come and live and die and rise again for us. And he says, yes, I'll do that for my family, to bless the mess. God knows that we're all sinful. God knows that we've all fallen short. God knows that none of us measure up. God knows that all of us are foreigners, just like Ruth was, and don't deserve to be brought into his family. And yet he looks at us and says, I choose you, and I choose you, and I choose you, and I choose you. And God so loves the world that Jesus comes to save us all. That's the Redeemer, the rescuer that we have, this God who faithfully blesses the messes. Church, may you know that you are blessed. And as you look at all the blessings in your life, may you point back to Jesus and say, all this is from you because of your faithfulness and goodness. And as you look at your life and see the messes, may you turn to God and say, I give this all to you. Help me to find the blessing. Help me to be the blessing. Help me to sacrifice, so that we can get to the blessing. God faithfully blesses the messes. Let's pray together. God, we give you thanks for this morning, and we give you thanks for your word that is living and active. We thank you that you've recorded it and preserved it perfectly for us so that we can look back to this family thousands of years ago, before the time of Jesus, and say, man, what a mess that was. and how faithful you were to them, how good you were to them. God, I thank you that we can look at a character like Boaz and say, man, that is a faithful, godly, good, generous, kind, compassionate guy, but he's nothing compared to my God. He's nothing compared to Jesus. His sacrifice is just a shadow in comparison to what Jesus has done for us. And God, I pray for each person represented here, for all the relationships that they're in. God, I pray that in those situations that are difficult, that are challenging, that are strained, I pray that they would begin to see the blessing you're working through it. And Lord, I know that often that will take sacrifice and compromise and forgiveness and apologies and often tears. But Lord, I pray that instead of giving up or walking away, and that we would be faithful, and that we would be committed to living in the servant way of Jesus, to following you, to looking for opportunities to sacrifice and bless because of how much you've given and done for us. Lord, I pray that you would be blessing those who are married here, that you draw them closer together. I pray for the parents, you would bless them with wisdom in their parenting. I pray for the children here, that they would just see the blessing they have in the family you've given them. I would pray for the single people here, that they would just be blessed by an incredible community of friends and family around them. God, I pray for the widows who are here and the widowers. God, that you would just bless them to overflowing, that they'd look at their lives and say, man, I am just swimming in blessing right now. And Lord, for everything else on our hearts and minds today, Lord, as we think about fires across our province, and as we think about wars and conflicts around us, as we think about divisions, as we think about strains, Lord, I just pray that we would continue calling out to you, knowing that you are faithful and that you're good and that there's nothing that's too big or too difficult or too challenging for you to repair. And so we commit all those circumstances and situations to you, trusting in your Son Jesus, who taught us to pray, Our Father,